The opinions you hear on Your Mountain from individual hosts or guests do not necessarily represent those of Your Mountain, our sponsors, or other entities we're affiliated with professionally or otherwise. You've waited long enough. Go listen to the show.
There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is Your Mountain.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. I am your host, David Williams, as usual, and Nephi Cole is, I can't tell what, he's holding a drink, but I can't tell what, because
it's a delicious Barks root beer because
zero sugar root beer.
Because it's late, Dave. It's late at night, and so when it's late at night, we crack open a Barks root beer and we throw one back.
You know what I should be doing right now?
I don't. Probably sleeping.
No. Well, yeah, but you know what else I should be doing?
What?
I've had an elk that's been sitting in my cooler for a week. I probably should be out there in my garage cutting it up.
Well, we make sacrifices for what's important, don't we?
We do. So I'll just throw a little more ice on it tomorrow and probably the next day and the next day, and we'll let it age for 2 to 3 weeks.
That's what you do. You let it age until it looks a little like cheese.
Yeah.
Till you can just pull pieces of that off, and it just melts in your mouth.
I have to brag a little because this was a really, really good big game hunting season for me.
I know.
I've not heard your stories yet.
I don't have any yet, Dave. So why don't you just go ahead and tell your stories, Big Shot? I don't have any stories yet.
I won't tell any stories, but I did, except that I drew a mule deer in what I think is a pretty good unit, and I hadn't drawn it in several years, 4 or 5 years. So I said, I'm going to hold out. I'm going to hunt this unit hard. I left for like a 10-day deer and elk hunt. I'm like, I'm going to hunt this hard. Less than 24 hours into the hunt, I shot this deer. You've seen a picture of it.
It's massive. It's one of the biggest mule deer I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it was a nice buck.
And I mean in pictures. I don't mean in person. I mean, this deer is big. Yeah, like there's no human being that would look at the deer and not think it's big.
Like nobody would pass on that in the first minute of their hunt or the last minute of their hunt or anything in between. So I'm like, I guess I came out here to hunt hard and pass on a bunch of deer and try and find something big. And
guess not.
My hunt lasted less than 24 hours.
Yeah. So if you were just there for the camping, you ruined the experience.
Oh, I kept camping because I still had an elk tag to try and fill, which I then went out and proceeded to shoot a nice 6x7 bull on a general tag here in Wyoming. And that was pretty awesome too.
You know what'll make you sick? You want to hear a story that'll actually make you mad, maybe even too. And then you got an antelope earlier.
Yeah, I did. I got an antelope earlier. Took my son out and I got a nice buck.
So I've got a friend who just got into hunting.
Oh no.
He's from out of state.
390-inch bull?
No, the funny part is this guy, last year, he came to the state and we went on a cow hunt together, and he was unsuccessful. And so this year, I get a call after the draws are over, and he's like, "Hey, Nephi, guess what?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I drew." I'm like, "What did you draw?" Dave, he drew everything. He's from out of state, and he literally drew everything. He drew a limited elk area, a bull. He drew an additional cow-calf for the same area. He drew mule deer, and he drew buck antelope, all for the same geographic location. And he was in a party with his other bro. And so these dudes showed up with a handful of tags.
Like 8 tags?
They filled every tag. We're talking about new hunters. In like a 72-hour period, they got everything done.
Why would I be mad about that? That sounds awesome.
It's ruined. It's ruined hunting for me. How can it not ruin hunting for them?
Now they've got a taste of it, and they'll long for that feeling again, and they'll keep applying and they'll keep trying.
It's unbelievable.
Keep chasing that moment for the rest of their life.
It's unbelievable. And so they're headed back.
They're hunters for life now, I bet.
Dude, they're driving 3 states away with an enclosed trailer literally full of meat. Like, I can't even imagine,
Well, good for them. That's awesome.
It's insane.
I'm only saying that because I punched all of my tags, so I feel happy for everybody. If I hadn't filled any tags,
And I'm
hearing
bitter.
all these stories, you're bitter because you haven't filled
Yeah.
a tag yet.
I haven't even Well, I shot a.
Yeah, I thought you hunted a
I
little
went
bit.
predator hunting, Dave. It was quite
I
successful.
thought you went elk hunting for some reason.
I spent 2 days
And
in the
deer
field.
hunting.
2 days in the field with the same guy.
Yeah,
So
okay.
he'd never been. So I took him to an area like, see, this is what happens when you share your spots. You share your spots, and if he ever draws that tag in, he's going back to that spot. That's for sure. Like,
I bet.
yeah, I spent 2 days up in the mountains with him. Just I had a cow tag for the same area. So, I just was driving. I was like, yeah, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do that, and like the dude can't. I mean, like he just doesn't know anything. And but hey, apparently sometimes you're just living right, and I'm not.
So, I haven't killed a deer in a few years, and I didn't get an elk last year. Last year was just a down year. Remember on an earlier podcast, I mentioned how dove season was so awesome for me this year. And like, I was very superstitious. And I said, I really believe if you have a good dove season, it sets you up to have a good rest of your season.
You should buy more tags.
Right. I've still got a,
You should get a bear.
cow tag in my, I've got a cow tag in my pocket.
You should for sure get a bear. You should for sure get a cat tag. Let's see, what else?
This feels like the year of Dave, doesn't it? I should probably have every tag in my pocket.
Yeah, you should. And mostly I'm just saying that because I want you to have wasted some money. I really want you to get some tags that you don't get to fill. And it'd be fascinating if you just filled them. But I just feel like it's not right for Dave for you to fill all those tags. You should have
Not just fill them, but
you
with
should have
quality, like quality animals too. Like it was pretty cool. Like here's what I was going to say.
I'd be careful if I were you. I'd be looking for comets.
Well, here's what I was going to say. I haven't done anything on our social media since like early in the summer. Mm-hmm. Should I post those pictures?
No, you shouldn't. You should go to
Or should
church. That's what you should do. You should go to church. Yep, you should. You should go to church.
Thank God.
You absolutely should. You should find somebody. You should find a Salvation Army tin and start throwing money in that thing. Go to church, and you see whatever you did this year, do that again. There you go.
I was just going to say, like, if we got enough people saying, "Hey, I'd love to see a picture of that buck," maybe I'd
don't do it.
Re-engage in our social media again.
Then Matt Ranella will send you dirty emails. He'll just yell at you
for posting the grip.
Yeah, you'll get hate mail from Hunt Quietly.
I can handle a little hate mail. It's a nice buck.
Yeah, nice job.
Yeah, thanks. Let's turn to some substance.
Yes.
I know the first thing you wanted to talk about. So we're recording this.
Owls.
By the
That's
way,
the first thing.
You want me to do that first? All right.
Well, let's get that out of the way.
All right. I don't know if we'll have this episode posted before this actually happens.
We're going to post it. This is a priority episode.
All right, because I'm sitting on one. I think that we haven't posted.
I haven't got it mixed down yet. So I'm going to mix this one down first. How's that?
You mean the one that we recorded a month ago? Still haven't gotten
still
that
on
mixed
this
down
machine
yet?
right next to me.
That's amazing. So we've got some content ready for you eventually.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah. Good. So this time it's not my fault. Sometimes I end up sitting on it for a little bit after you mix it down and don't get something posted. So good. This time it's your fault. All right. Well, then maybe this will be relevant. So before we get to the other stuff, here's a quick thing. Like, I guarantee you almost nobody has heard of this, like that this is actually happening. So at the tail end of the Biden administration, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service created a barred owl management plan. You're like, why in the world were we even talking about this? Like a barred owl management plan. Well, here's the deal. If you're aware of the Pacific Northwest, everybody's heard of the northern spotted owl, right? Everybody's heard of the northern spotted owl. It was one of the things that contributed to the decline in the timber industry in the Northwest in the early 1990s when it was listed, because it was viewed as the science was suggesting that these northern spotted owls were declining, and the decline was due to the loss of old growth intact old growth forest habitat in the Northwest. And because of that, there are other factors that caused the timber industry to decline significantly, but that certainly contributed to it. Well, fast forward, and this owl that's native to North America, and there are lots and lots of them, this barred owl, like B-A-R-R-E-D, barred owl. This barred owl typically was not found in the Pacific Northwest. It didn't overlap with northern spotted owl or the California spotted owl. These Northwest, California, Washington, Oregon. It was found all over the country, but it hadn't gone there. Well, in the past couple of decades, they've moved into these areas where they'd never been before. And they are bigger and more aggressive, and they outcompete northern spotted owls for resources. And it's contributing to the continued decline of northern spotted owls. So this Fish and Wildlife Service management plan was set up to create a process to lethally remove a certain number of barred owls every year for the next 30 years. And when you hear the big number, you hear this number of they're trying to kill 500,000 barred owls, right? Well, it's up to 500,000 over 30 years. So when you break that down on a number of owls per year, it's actually a pretty small number. And it turns out to be about 0.5% of the population of barred owls in the country that the service is looking to remove to help northern spotted owls and California owls in an area where they've not historically been found. That's your background. So what's happening? Well, there is a guy, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's the former executive director of the Humane Society, HSUS. And he left there and he started another organization. And he has convinced a number of fiscal conservative Republicans in the House and the Senate that this is a boondoggle, fool's errand waste of money, because the price tag on this program is up to $1.5 billion over 30 years, not a per year thing, but over 30 years. And that's the max end. Like the likely amount spent is much, much lower. But when you break that down on the amount spent per year, it's actually, I haven't done the quick math on that, but obviously it's a much, much smaller number. But he's managed to say, this is a waste of money. We shouldn't be doing this, right? And he's got some fiscal conservatives really believing it. And then there's some Democrats also that are like, well, we shouldn't be killing a whole bunch of owls. These are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. They're raptors. So, but what's happened is, because he's managed to convince these folks that this is fiscally irresponsible, this is bad policy, and we shouldn't be doing it, and it was a policy that was created by the Biden administration, there is pressure right now on congressional Republicans to just tear down everything Biden did.
So even though this is a species that is, harming an endangered species, it doesn't matter, because we're just like, we're ignoring that fact. We're just, we'll let the invasives come in just because we don't like the guy who put the rule in to save the native species.
Right. So you've heard us talk on prior episodes about the Congressional Review Act.
Yeah.
They're using the Congressional Review Act, which is this law that allows Congress to invalidate a rule, and then the administration can never adopt a substantially similar rule in the future without Congress approving it. So if this resolution in Congress passes and this rule is rescinded, it takes a wildlife management tool out of the toolbox. This is the way I describe this is, and why the hunting community, the hunting nonprofit community is pushing back on this. They're fighting this. They're opposed to the CRA because they support science-based wildlife management, and that you shouldn't take away a tool in the toolbox for science-based wildlife management, even if one of those tools happens to be lethal removal. right? And so that's the pushback right now. The question is, can you get enough Republicans and Democrats to oppose this CRA so it doesn't go into effect? What's really interesting, the bedfellows it's created, is you have actually the Trump administration is opposed to this Congressional Review Act. They want the rule to stay in place. So Secretary Burgum wants the rule to stay in place. The White House wants the rule to stay in place. The timber industry wants the rule to stay in place because the more barred owls there are, the impacting northern spotted owls, the harder it is for the timber industry to do any logging of any kind. And all of the Endangered Species Act consultation stuff they have to do, Section 7 consultation, it just makes it incredibly complicated.
You have these unnatural pressures that are harming this resource that they're trying to protect because protection of the resource allows them to harvest the timber. Right. And so now you have this third thing that's out there that suddenly all the stuff that they were doing, as all the money they were investing in protecting this thing so that they could get the timber off the hillsides, like it becomes irrelevant because you're going to lose. You potentially could lose it anyway because of the invasive nature of the other competing species.
Right. And the other thing here is, so you have the timber industry opposed to it, the hunting community opposed to it, the Trump administration opposed to it, and you actually have a lot of the environmental community opposed to it as well. So you have this really odd collection of bedfellows, and yet you have this guy that was the former executive director of the Humane Society that's actually managed to convince a bunch of fiscal conservatives this is bad policy and it should be repealed. And so that's going on right now. And it's just worth noting. I just wanted to mention that's out there and going on because there are these things that most people probably have never heard about, don't even know it's going on, don't know what it's about, and it's actually a thing that has real impact. And if you think that's a lot of money, I'm not saying it's not a lot of money to do that, but look, we spend a lot of money on predator control, for example. We spend a lot of money on managing coyotes, on managing prairie dogs, through these federal programs. We've spent money to remove big mountain goats out of Olympic National Park. We've spent money to bring in folks in Wyoming and Grand Teton National Park to eradicate mountain goats that were viewed as invasive. There have been tens of millions or maybe hundreds of millions of dollars trying to deal with the invasive Asian carp in the Mississippi watershed, right? We spend money on these things that cause conflicts. It's part of wildlife management. And so I'm just mentioning that. We don't have to go into any more detail. I just think it's a really interesting thing that's going on out there. And probably most people have no idea it's happening. And this thing could move pretty fast. We're recording this on a Thursday night in the 23rd of October. And it's possible that this gets a vote sometime next week, the week of Halloween.
Cool.
And I'll bet none of you have heard, nobody listening, maybe some, but I bet the majority of people listening to this have never heard this is happening.
Let's talk about the Supreme Court.
All right. Pivoting to the Supreme Court. Corner crossing. So
go back and listen to our 10 episodes that we've done on corner crossing because no one has been following this better than us. I'm not kidding. For the last, 3+ years?
Several years.
Well, it's from the very beginning. So if you want to hear this whole, everything down to from analysis to predictions to, feeling good about being right, go listen to those 10 episodes. They're really good.
Yeah. Well, and we may not have been right. We kind of just said it. We've been laying it all out, and we've been saying tread cautiously, right?
Yeah. Well, we've been pragmatic about it because it's an issue that the unique thing about this issue, to remind everybody from the beginning, why we're here. So corner crossing is, of course, it's a question mark that's been out there for quite some time because there's been a lot of, would it be fair to say gray area, Dave, in this regards? Because
unsettled law until recently. Yeah. I don't think that there's still no question on some of this stuff because there's some tricky stuff going on here that bears discussion. But everybody got really excited when three guys, four guys
went over a survey pin, right, on Elk Mountain, and then
in Wyoming,
and the area that they went in, it was pretty clean. It was pretty well known. Anyway, they got, they successfully They successfully didn't get, lose their shirts to a civil lawsuit or get criminal penalties because of the situation. And so I'd say be careful because of that situation. And then one of the things that, I had a question about the, corners. I'm like, well, why was the West set up this way? And again, go listen to the episodes. But, as we know, like we have these unique patterns in parts of the West, specifically that area of Wyoming where it literally looks like a checkerboard, which is why we call it checkerboard. Well, why? Because when the railroad went through there and the federal government tried to incentivize settling of the West, they divided that up and they said, we're going to take every other section is going to belong to us. And then every other section is going to be private land owned by who?
The railroad.
By the railroad. And the idea was to get the railroad to be able to sell that land to private individuals or keep it for themselves or whatever in order to help monetize or to help repay them for that service.
To help, to finance the construction of the railroad. Yeah.
So that's why we've got this weird land ownership pattern there. So, and I'm sure that the thought was that in the future, just like everything else in the Homestead Act, right, is that most of these lands, like, whether it's federal land or railroad land, people would homestead stuff, we'd sell stuff. Well, when you're talking about a spot that you can't really homestead, well, of course, nobody homesteads it. And so it just continues to belong to the federal government. And eventually, Bureau of Land Management takes that over. And so now, while it wasn't what they planned for land use management probably back then, it's not what they were looking at as an end goal, it's become a phenomenal natural resource for people like me that like to hunt, or you that like to hunt. Here's the cautionary thing. The caution with, so with corner crossing now,
Can we say what happened first?
You go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the owner of the ranch, Fred Eshelman, petitioned for cert to the United States Supreme Court, which is effectively saying, I want to appeal the decision of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. 10th Circuit Court of Appeals had issued a decision that effectively said the actions that the hunters took to cross the corners in that area did not constitute a trespass. They were legal, and that the landowner actually, by putting up the chain across, violated the Unlawful Enclosures Act, impeding lawful access to public land. And the Supreme Court last week considered that petition for cert and denied it. So all that means is the Supreme Court declined to take the case. It doesn't mean they agree with the outcome. That's something I want to say. It doesn't mean they agree with the 10th Circuit. It's not an affirmation of the 10th Circuit. It's just saying we're not taking this case, and the decision of the 10th Circuit stands, which means that the decision applies that allows for current corner crossing as long as certain conditions are met, applies to those states that are in the 10th Circuit. If you are not in a state that is in the 10th Circuit, that case does not apply to you. This is not a national precedent. And it doesn't create a precedent that would apply to other circumstances in other states that are not in the 10th Circuit.
Even in Wyoming, there are going to be circumstances that are different, where people would have to say, like, well, how is this different? And it's going to apply there.
Here's an example I want to give, because this is something I've been thinking about, because I know this is an example that's going to happen. Do you have your phone on you, Nephi?
I do.
Pull up Onyx.
What makes you think I'm one of those people that just has Onyx on their phone and
you
think I'm made of money, Dave?
Pull it up.
I got it.
All right. Go to Elk Mountain.
Okay, I will. I love that place. Someday I want to hunt there when somebody opens the gate, because I do not want to have to hike across all those little squares. Okay.
Yeah.
Where am I at? There's Torrington.
Yeah. Tell me when you find Elk Mountain.
I got it. I'm there.
All right. Zoom in on a little bit.
Okay.
And you're going to see, I'm going to hold this up to my screen up here. I don't know if you can
I got
see
you.
it. Okay. So on here, and this is why I want you to look at it, because this is, I think, a good discussion point. On Onyx, and everybody can pull up Onyx if you want. This will be a great exercise for everybody that's listening can pull up Onyx, and you can go to Elk Mountain in south central Wyoming. It's
we'll get you
southeast of Rawlins, right? Just south of Interstate 80, in north of the Snowy Range Mountains.
Yeah, it's 41 degrees, 39 minutes, 0.855 north, 106, 23.328 west.
Okay. Here's why I want to have this discussion, because this is something that's going through my head. There are a couple of routes you could look at. I bet if you're looking at this, Nephi, you're looking at the corners and you're like, I see a couple of routes up to the top of Elk Mountain that come from public roads. And what I'm telling you is, I'm not telling anybody which route to take. I'm just using this as an example, because if you look at this area around Elk Mountain, there are the yellow sections, which are BLM, right?
Yep.
And there are the blue sections that are state trust land owned by the state of Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
The way that, and the shortest route to the top of Elk Mountain, crossing corners, would be crossing state section to state section and then to federal section at the corner. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Tread so carefully, because that 10th Circuit case and the district court case said that airspace belongs to the landowner. Okay? But they said in this instance, the Unlawful Enclosures Act created effectively like an exception to that. Like you had to be able to have access to that federal land. Right. So you could cross from federal to federal over a survey pin corner through the airspace, as long as you didn't touch the ground of the private landowner on either corner. It does not say that you can cross from state to state through the airspace of that landowner. The Unlawful Enclosures Act applies to federal land. It doesn't apply to state land, state trust land.
Yeah.
Right? There's still an argument to be made. And it maybe is unsettled law, but there's still an argument to be made that if you crossed from state to state through the airspace, that there could be a potential trespass.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing, Dave, that I think people talk that this bothers me. He's a guy who used to professionally do mapping, and we had a thing in the back of our truck. So when I go out and map, we had a satellite receiver that then talked to our handheld GPS unit, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, to get it more accurate so that you're actually on your point. Because how accurate are you without that? You're a lot more accurate today than you were 25 years ago when we were doing it. But you're still, there's a thing that happens.
You're within feet now.
You're within feet, which is great.
Inches. Yeah.
But if you're looking at property lines, feet matter.
Feet matter a lot.
And so the only thing, what's key here is like, if you're at that survey pin, that's the only spot where you can actually know that you're actually crossing at a corner. And too bad everybody has Onyx now. We all just look at the Onyx map, right? And people just assume that Onyx is right. Onyx isn't right. It's never right. And here's why I say it's never right. Because the thing that you're holding in your hand is not reality. The thing that we're holding in our hand is an abstract representation of reality, where we've taken a curved earth, what's lost little shapes on it, and we've projected an image through it in order to make a flat map that we can look at on our device or on our hand or whatever. But all maps are an abstract representation of what's on the ground. So what does that mean? That means that even though your device that's in your hand might show you that you're on, you're perfectly on the side of the line, don't push it. Don't get right to the edge and say, because my phone says I'm 6 inches away from this corner, I'm exactly 6 inches away from the corner. You're probably not. And so we get into this finite area. Why do I bring that up? Why does it even matter? Well, the only reason it matters is because I would say be a courteous guest. A really weird thing has happened with this, which is with this access question. As much as we've, those of us who really like hunting public lands want to be able to, improve those opportunities and get that access. there's a certain smugness and kind of like an in-your-face thing that's coming out because of this, where there are a lot of folks who are really pushing the limits of access. And we as a community have become emboldened to, maybe push the line. And there's a real problem with pushing the line. As I tell people frequently, the problem is we're arguing about what the law is today. And if we're not courteous guests, the law changes. Because here's how that works. The law isn't set in stone. The law is written by a bunch of legislators who are in a big building, in this case in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And if people are too audacious and frankly rude about how they're going about this, the law is going to change. And
well, I'm going to pump the brakes on it just a little bit.
You can, Dave. Then I'm going to argue with you.
You can argue with me on this particular issue, on the corner crossing issue.
In this case,
at least with respect to federal land, right? With respect to federal land, the legislature can't do much of anything because you have a 10th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals and you have a supremacy clause in the Constitution that says federal law trumps state law. The state could do whatever it wants to say you can't cross at these corners to get access to federal land, and it'll mean nothing because you have a 10th Circuit Court opinion saying you can do it. So here's my but. So everything has a but.
I'm waiting because I'm going to throw a wrench in your... Go ahead.
So everything has a but. It doesn't mean, and here there too, it doesn't mean that you couldn't end up with some congressional action in DC to change the law or create a new law around public land access. And the second piece is, like I said to begin with, the 10th Circuit opinion applies to access to federal lands.
Have you ever considered...
Not to state lands. And so, the legislature does have the ability to make it much more difficult to access state lands.
Have you ever considered the possibility that a state would take away, let's say you were using, everything is not the same, right? Access to everywhere for every purpose isn't the same. There are certain things that we want to access lands for that the state actually does have control of. Have you ever considered what would happen if the state, let's say, messed with something like that?
Well, I see what you're saying. So you could say, what we're going to do? We're just going to close this area to hunting.
That's exactly right.
So
that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, yeah, you're right. If you want to go there and picnic, yeah, great. Yeah. Jump over. Yeah. I'm a private recreator. That works. But we're not very inventive. Like people aren't like we need to be careful. We need to be courteous. Because you don't know.
Right. That's right. Like if things go sideways, if things get really, really bad,
they just say you can't do it with a gun.
They could say
with an elk tag in your pocket.
All they would, the authority they would have is to say this geographic area is closed to hunting X, Y, and Z animals. Like that's what they do. They could just close it down to hunting because the state has primacy over wildlife.
Do I think that they'll do that? No. But there are some stuff. There's some stuff that's where there's been a proliferation. For example, like with this same issue, right? There are certain areas where people haven't been in before. Where now there's a rush of people to get into these areas. And one of them, there's this area in northeastern Wyoming called Fortification. So this is an area very tough to get into, very difficult to access. And in the
Fortification Creek, right? Fortification Creek unit. Yeah.
Yes, and in the past for people to get in there, what did they have to do? If they wanted to get in there, they look it out on a map and they're like, well, it's tough to get in. It's like going into the thoroughfare, right? Because you could get in there and hunt, but you were going to have to, you were going to burn some boot sole to get in there. You're going to have to take a pack string in there. And you were going to be literally hours from being able to get out of there. And it's surrounded, of course, by private lands. So it's unique. It's kind of like an island, right? So here's what people did. There's one way to get on the island. There's a spot you can get in on the island. It's a trail. And so what people have started to do is, in the past, people started to think like, well, I'm going to have to get horses to go in on that trail. Well, with this influx of the emboldened the emboldened, nature, right? They've got huge issues right now over the last couple of years with e-bikes, because a lot of people are dumb just like me, and they just figured that their e-bike, they can just go anywhere they want on their e-bike, right? And so now you have people taking, e-bikes in on a non-motorized trail. Well, guess what, Dave? You can't.
Yeah, you can't do that.
You can't do that. Now, how many people actually know that? Well, it's not going to be the majority of people. Like, it actually requires quite a bit of thought and foresight to look at all these things, because there's an assumption made. And again, like, we have there's more and more push, more pressure to get into these, difficult to access areas. And so you get people being inventive and trying to use a new tool to get into a spot, like an e-bike, but you can't. And so what does this do? It puts huge pressure on the resource, right? But it also puts pressure on the enforcement, because now you have an issue where your wardens are trying to figure that out. They have to figure out how to deal with that. They have to monitor that. There's more people, there's more access, and it becomes problematic for them.
I do want to say one thing. I want to be clear about this with e-bikes in particular. Just because a trail is identified as non-motorized does not automatically mean that e-bikes are prohibited on those trails. In each area, they can designate those trails individually as being. That's right.
And that's what's challenging, right? Is because this is on a case-by-case basis.
That's right.
So the default.
So my point is you have to know.
Yes.
You have to know the area where you're going, and you have to know the regulations that apply there, because there's a default prohibition in non-motorized trails, but it doesn't mean that you can't use them on all non-motorized trails. So you have to know the regulations of the specific trail that you're wanting to go on to know, can I actually use this? Because
I go ahead.
No, finish. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's the temptation is to be lazy about it, right? Is not to do, like, there's a bunch of homework that needs to be done to determine whether or not, you can, it's like those guys who looked at that corner. It's like that wasn't something that they just did, right? They built this contraption. They thought about it. Like, it was like they put a lot of thought into it. So let's talk about how else we could get in there, Dave. So we have an island in the sky that I want to go hunt on. And so, like, e-bikes, like, what if e-bike doesn't work? What's to keep me from flying in?
That's a great question, right? People do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Randy Newberg has done it, right? Like, he's taken a helicopter, for example, into some parcels of public to hunt.
Yeah, landlocked public.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I sent you a thing. I don't know if you got it, but it looks at, like, so what would that look like in Montana? So in Montana, they passed a bill. It was SB 106. So for hunters to land aircraft for hunting purposes on private property in Montana, it requires written permission. And that seems reasonable, right? If somebody's going to land a helicopter on your private, they should.
Well, I would pretty much think that would apply
anyway. But it's
anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
don't know why you need a specific law for that.
And in Montana, they made it very clear you can fly into a landlocked spot, but you're required to wait 24 hours before you can legally hunt. So in Montana, you got to wait 24 hours. And everywhere, just to be clear, aerial hunting is prohibited by federal law. So there's this discussion of, like, well, aerial hunting, you cannot hunt from an airplane, with very few exceptions, from an aircraft of any kind in the United States of America, because of the Aerial Hunting Act. And that's, federal law. It's long. You can look at it and what it means. And basically that's now, if you're hunting, and it doesn't matter whether it's, if it's predators or feral hogs or whatever, you're going to be permitted if you're doing that. So it's not like you can just decide, like, I'm going to buy a Cessna and go do it. You can't. Can you do it with the right permits and everything? You can. Are you going to be able to hunt big game with an aircraft? No, you're not. And this isn't controversial. It's this consensus. That's one of my new favorite things to say. It's not controversy. It's consensus. And so there are some states that have that 24-hour requirement, where 24 hours, like, you're just not going to hunt within 24 hours. Well, why?
Yeah, it's because you can't prove. Like, a lot of states say you can't scout from the air. and you can't prove that you weren't scouting on the flight into that spot. And so the safest thing to do from a hunter ethics standpoint is give it a 24-hour rest period. Then you allow any animals you might have seen in the air on the way in to disperse and move about, and you're not getting an unfair advantage.
Yeah. So that's
it's a fair chase hunt.
Yep. And that's the case. And the same law in Wyoming, they changed that. So you're not actually required to wait 24 hours in Wyoming. That's not a requirement.
No, but you cannot scout.
That's right.
From the air.
So you have
24 hours. There has to be more than 24 hours before you hunt if you're scouting from the air.
Yes. But they can drop you off, and as long as you say like, "Hey man, I didn't see a thing," then
blindfold me, take me in. I want to hunt. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you could, that would be kosher to do that. You could do that.
So every state's going to be a little
So
different.
if you or I had a helicopter, Dave, we could do that. You or I, we could jump in our helicopter and we'd fly in there. Now, what gets interesting is you can't land it everywhere, because you got to have A, the right permits, and B, it's just like you can't drop your pickup truck in the middle of a square of BLM. You just can't do it. There's like certain places you can be with your pickup truck and certain places you can't.
Well, like wilderness areas, you can't touch down a helicopter in a wilderness area.
Yeah, and on things
you can
like
rappel off the side of it.
Yeah, well, and like
which sounds awesome.
State lands in Wyoming, you could land that helicopter in on the 2-track, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. And so if you or I, in fact, I'd like you to invest in a helicopter right now, because so that we could do this. Now here's where it
I already
gets
got all my
interesting.
Animals. I don't need a helicopter this year.
I know you're going to need one later. So now here's where it gets interesting. This has actually been happening, right? So there's this article that came out in Guns and Ammo, really interesting article. It's called "Landlocked and Loaded," and this kind of goes back to talking about kind of those landowners and folks, like being a good neighbor and things like that. And so yeah, you can fly in on a place if you got a buddy that has the ability to do that. You can do that. Here's the controversy on this one: is a helicopter operator who shows that is a service that they provide is picking people up and taking them in to landlocked parcels, and dropping them off on BLM, and is willing to go in and pick them up and take them someplace else. And what makes this interesting, so there's a ranch in Wyoming, one of these places. There's a bunch of them. This has been happening for 2-3 years where this has been happening. Here's the tricky part. If you or I, Dave, have a helicopter to do that, we can do that because we're private individuals, right? If you ask me for a ride in your truck, right? You can drop me off on BLM, right?
Of course.
Okay. What happens if I tell you that I want to pay you to take me to where you shot your mule deer and drop me off with a tent?
Yeah, I mean, it's like...
So interestingly enough, in Wyoming...
I would say it would depend. So here's the circumstance.
This is where it's gotten really funky.
Yeah, but I'm going to say
go ahead.
Just to be clear, if you or I went out there and it's like, you better pay me. I'm like, I will cover your gas. Like, I'll pay for your gas to take me out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sort of depends what's the intent of the payment. Like, and I'm just trying to make
100%
make that point.
And that's
like, what's
why
the intent of the payment.
So now there's all these landowners around the state of Wyoming who are all fired up because they see this as, they think it appears to them that there's this may be endeavor for profit, right?
Like a new outfitting business.
Yeah. And so in Wyoming, what's interesting because Wyoming defines what an outfitter is. And so, in Wyoming, if you or I have a helicopter and we're landing on private with permission, well, that's fine. It doesn't matter whether you're going hunting or not. As long as you have permission to hunt, you're good. It changes as soon as it's public ground. If it's public ground and I am, and you are paying me to take you in, Wyoming law defines outfitting as including packing. And so it's in there, and here's the crazy part. It's in a different part of the statute. So it's not in like the game. So we already talked about this, right? You can fly in. Game and Fish law says you can fly in. I can drop you off. That's fine as long as you didn't see animals, right? Well, that's fine if I was picnicking or whatever, or if it was our helicopter. But as soon as you are, it doesn't matter whether it's a goat or a truck or a helicopter, and it appears in the Wyoming law that outfitters are folks who are carrying hunters for profit. And if that's what you're doing, you're an outfitter and you have to be licensed. And there was some question marks about whether these trips were outfitted trips or not. Specifically because some of the areas, like you had an outfitter who is for example, there's a piece of state ground where one of these drop-offs occurred, where the only person licensed to outfit that piece of state ground is a guy that's really mad about this, this helicopter. So here's where this gets into the issue, right, that we talked about before. What happens if everybody gets mad about that? So somebody's like, hey, you know what? I've invented a new way to do this. Like suddenly, this issue's like, I don't see this issue going away. Somebody's going to say like, you know what? We need to solve this issue because, when we, you could say that when we wrote the outfitter code, we didn't anticipate this, but it actually kind of did, because it really doesn't matter whether you're driving a truck or driving a bus or driving a train. It's all the same to that code. It really doesn't care what your vehicle is. It just cares whether it's okay for you to do that. And so it's, it's controversy, and it's controversy that's being caused by this renewed emphasis that we have of like, hey, this is a spot we couldn't access before. How can we figure out how to do it? It's really interesting. Now, the most interesting part to me is this, Dave. So you have, there's a part like the skate or die part that's like, yeah, we should figure out how to get into those spots without having, these guys obviously didn't want to have to work with an outfitter to do that, right? So what are they doing? They're just paying a different outfitter. We're gonna pay somebody else to provide the service because we don't want to ride in on horses. Well, if we can find somebody else to do this, it's really interesting. It's an interesting little, it's an interesting issue, and I anticipate that at the outfitters board meeting in December, they'll probably find a solution to it because it's pretty interesting.
I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask. Should it be considered outfitting? First of all, I mean, I think that's I'm not, pontificate, but I think it's a fair question to ask. Should that be considered outfitting? If you're taking somebody in and dropping them off for a DIY hunt on public land, and this is the only way they can access that public land, absent having permission to cross private land.
Well,
it's a reasonable discussion to have of should that actually be considered outfitting, and should the only person that can provide you that access is somebody that has an outfitting relationship with the surrounding landowner and then has that state parcel or that federal parcel included as part of the land, their outfitting, geographic outfitting area. So they have exclusive rights because of the relationship they have with the landowner to be able to then provide access to public land. So I think it's a worthwhile discussion question.
Well, devil's advocate, or the permit they have with the BLM, right? Because these are areas where if you're providing that service, it's actually a commercial activity you're required to be permitted. Now, if you're providing it for free, it's no longer a commercial activity. Anybody can do it. If you are having a helicopter, absolutely. We can take all our buddies there. We can do whatever we want. It doesn't matter. Now, as soon as it becomes a commercial endeavor, that's not the case anymore. And so I guess that's the question is, do we see, if you are the state and right, this is going to be a commercial endeavor. So some would say that the outfitting laws are created to be exclusionary. And I'm not saying that I think that that's the case or not, but they are a fence to keep everybody from being an outfitter. There's certain things that are required if you're going to be one. So in that case, why should a person transporting hunters meat and stuff, should they be an outfitter?
And devil's advocate the other way.
Yeah.
Or not devil's advocate, or just counterpoint. If that federal land belongs to every American, or, that's the idea, should the ability to access that federal land that belongs to everybody be limited to only the handful of people that that have a relationship with or a contract with a registered outfitter,
A service provider.
and that's the only way that they're actually allowed to hunt that piece of public land. You've commercialized hunting public land.
But I could, devil's advocate again.
Sure.
Well, it doesn't matter if there's no difference if you're a wedding photographer. If you're a wedding photographer and you're going to do business on that piece of BLM, you have to have a commercial permit for that.
Do you still have to? I thought the Explore Act changed that.
Let's say you're a mountain bike outfitter.
I think the Explore Act changed that.
I don't.
I think the Explore Act changed a lot of the permitting stuff because the idea was to make it less restrictive to do commercial activity. No, read the Explore Act, because the Explore Act was, the whole intent of that was, or one of the main intents of that was to make it less onerous and restrictive to do commercial activities on federal land. The idea was, if you're a photographer and you want to take pictures on federal land, maybe you don't have to have a permit. If you're taking groups of up to a certain amount onto public lands, maybe you don't need to have a permit. If you're wanting to film and the crew is of a certain size or smaller, you might not actually have to have a permit. I'd have to go back and read all the specifics of it. That just passed last year. It's new. But I
think you're right Congress, on photography. Now, the question is, like, there are still other activities like ski resorts, or there's a certain
level. That's a totally different kind of commercial activity. Or, you're talking huge disturbance and tens of thousands of people.
Outfitting, right? Outfitters are still required, and outfitters are still required to have
law.
Yeah, and federal law. You can't you can't outfit you cannot outfit in the national forest. You can't be a registered outfitter in the South Fork of the Shoshone River drainage without registering with the Forest Service there.
I understand that. Counterpoint. In that scenario, you or I don't have to hire an outfitter to go in there and hunt.
In this scenario, you don't either. You could just hike in.
But there are plenty of scenarios where you couldn't hike in. There are plenty of scenarios where you have completely landlocked public land, and you wouldn't be able to hike it. So you gave one scenario example where there actually is a public access point. But there are other scenarios, plenty of them, actually millions of acres of them, that there is no ingress or egress on the ground into these public land parcels. And currently, the only way to access them would be through an outfitter that has a relationship with the surrounding landowner, or via air.
Well, and I think it's arguable that you can via air. In the Wyoming statute, if you are transporting hunters, you can either A, be an outfitter, or B, be working for one. And so that gets really interesting when you start looking at other spots where, like, well, where does that apply? Where's that line? Is that, we could talk about whether that rule works or not. So let's say we had a busload of Amish people, and we were driving the busload of Amish people, we're the bus operator. You're putting them on the bus, taking them up to the mountain to hunt. Are you an outfitter?
So, I mean, this is why I say it's not cut and dry.
No, it's
I don't think this is cut and dry. I mean,
it's really interesting.
What the statute says. I don't think there's actually. I'd have to double check. I don't think there's actually any case law that's crystal clear on this.
No, luckily there's people who are actually. None of this is legal advice from us. We're just spitballing.
It's all speculation, right?
Now
spitballing the situation.
There are some guys who are responsible for actually taking a look at this and determining whether or not it's one way or the other. And luckily, it's not us.
Yeah,
but I do think it's fascinating. It's really interesting.
I agree, but I think from a public policy standpoint, the reason I'm bringing these counterpoints up, and I think we're going back and with point, counterpoint, is because there's a really interesting public policy discussion around this as well. You have the outfitter laws, commercial use laws. You have landowner interests. You also have the public's desire to be able to access public land as freely as possible, overlaying all of this. Like, it's all kind of woven together. And how do you answer these questions? And it's it's a very interesting public policy discussion.
Two interesting things with this. So I know that in Wyoming, they were actually already dealing with this issue because of goat packing. Believe it or not. Because what you had at trailheads, you had people who were like had a bunch of llamas, and so they just sit at a trailhead and would like just wait for somebody to come up, and they'd be like, "Hey, give me money, I'll take you up the trail." Well, under that current Wyoming law, guess what? You can't do that. You can't outfit unless you're an outfitter, and that's outfitting. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, because I mean, if you think about this like this, I mean, it really is a slippery slope. So are we going to say that like wherever you sit on this issue, it is an interesting issue, because what's the difference between the llama and a helicopter? Because if we're saying that, you know, anybody should be able to take people in and outfit, suddenly you don't have an outfitting license anymore. Because if that's all it is, I'm hugely conflicted by this, because you know that I think the best thing on earth would be for me to be able to pay like just high school kids to take my pack. You know, if I kill an elk, I want to just be able to dial up some high school kids on my phone, just like push a button and like the football team shows up to haul my elk out. I think that'd be the greatest thing on earth. But can you do that? I'm not sure that under the current way that it sits that you can. You could if they did it for free. But if you start paying people for a service that the state says, actually, you need to be licensed to provide this service, right? And it gets really interesting, because like on this issue, here's what, you know, I thought of, like, well, what if we just said, like, you and I buy a helicopter, right? And we're going to start dropping people off for dough, right? You and me, because this will be fun. But I get to drive. So you're the navigator. So anyway, wouldn't it start, this is just to me, wouldn't it start an arms race? Because what's to keep us from what's to keep everybody else from doing it? And then the crazy thing is, I think that if you're an outfitter and you have a helicopter and you're an outfitter, now can you just drop people off wherever you want to? And well, what if that's somebody else's business? It's really fascinating to me. And I think, I don't think we've anticipated, like, we're not built. I don't think this is one of those things where we're not built for the solution. Nobody's built for the solution. This is new ground. That's what I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot more of it. You have more and more people moving in, and you have more and more, I don't want to say conflict, but maybe conflict is the right word.
For sure.
Conflict between folks that want to trying to access public lands and landowners in the area. And, you know, folks are going to go to as many creative and extreme measures as possible to be able to access those public lands.
It's also going to be conflict between the guy who before was just putting on his boots and his backpack. Yeah. It's going to be conflict with that guy too, because as we get these tools, right, that allow people to access stuff they weren't accessing before, that maybe, you know, it might save us a day if we're willing to pay a couple grand for the ride. Well, you know, you're gonna run into an interesting conflict now between people who are saying like, yeah, I'm all about access, but wait a minute, you know, like I'm hiking in. And
yeah, but that issue's been there forever. Like that issue's been there as long as I've been hunting and well before that. Like, you know, I'll go into it, and it happened to me on this elk hunt. Like I went into a place and I was hunting this mountain, and I was chasing this herd of elk, and I was chasing them downhill, and there's a ranch at the bottom of this mountain, and somebody had permission to access through the ranch and cut off 8 miles worth of trip. I mean, I put like 8 miles on my boot to get to this spot, and this guy walked about half a mile uphill and shot this bull elk I'd been chasing. All right. And it's because he had the ability to get access to a place easier than I did, and he was there. And I'm like, all right, that happened. I'll go someplace else. The fact is, once we're in there, we still have to find the animals on that public land. It just was easier for him to get into that spot than it was for me to get into that spot. So be it. So now if you add another element of somebody flying in, like it's not a huge segment of the population that can afford that helicopter ride to get dropped into a place. So I don't feel like, to me, in the places I go, it's like, it's not going to increase the competition all that much. And in other places, like for the one person a year that gets dropped in there by a helicopter, is it going to cause, depending on the size of the parcel, it might cause some conflict with an outfitter that's got a business going on there that's hauled a bunch of clients in there on horseback and whatnot. It might.
Well, I can tell you, of course,
there's no perfect way to do this.
Of course, I know people. So, like, I know a place where this happened this year, and that's what was really interesting, because I know a former Delta Force guy who was sitting there with his cell phone, taking a picture as that was going on, and so it's really interesting to get that take, and to say like, okay, well, where does this start? And it's interesting. And again, I think that it's going to be an interesting discussion to see where people go with it. I actually, here's the thing that I'd say, going back to like, don't overdo it, everybody. Don't overdo it. Like when we have access to these tools, because here's why. So the landowner in this case, who wasn't really a landlocked area. It's just an area with difficult access, and you had to hike away to get into the other stuff. You had to hike to get into public land. You really had to work for it. But the landowner doesn't outfit. He just, it's not a guy that has an outfitting service on him. It's not a guy that, in fact, it's a guy that lets all sorts of people hunt, like Delta Force veterans who want to come up and hunt. And so the guy called me and said, hey, asked if it was like about the helicopter stuff. I was like, no, it's legal. You can do that. And so then but it's the interesting question was like, he's like, you know what he said, Dave? He said,
yeah, I know.
He said, why didn't they just call me? That's literally what he said, because nobody ever had. And so that's the part I'd say, like, as we think about this stuff going forward, I hope this is a fun conversation that people listen to it. And I hope that when you think about this stuff, you think about, okay, well, what are the ramifications of our actions if we're too tricky? Like, if we're not picking up the phone and talking to people, I think that this issue isn't going to go away in Wyoming because a bunch of people are mad because they don't like the way it was done. And so it's not going to go away soon. It's going to go away. Eventually, people will figure out how to deal with it. But if we want things to come out the right way for sportsmen in a way that actually works for landowners, there has to be this conversation that goes on beforehand. And we have to interact with each other so that these things don't turn into bombs. They don't become grenades.
Yeah. I want to build on that just a little bit, because I was thinking that just before you said it, I was thinking the same thing you just said. I'm like, the one way to mitigate this, or one of the ways to mitigate this a little bit, is, and this won't work in every circumstance, but do you want to spend $2,000 on a helicopter ride into a spot, or do you want to call up a landowner and pay $500 to access that same spot by driving through the road on their private land? And you might actually find, in a lot of scenarios, that a landowner might either just let you go, just let you drive through. I don't want you hunting my deeded land, but go ahead, you can go access this. Appreciate you asking. Or it might say, hey, I charge $500 or $1,000 or $200 or whatever it is to cross my deeded land to get to that public land. You may have created a positive relationship with a landowner there and gotten the same result, which is access to that land, for a fraction of the cost of taking a helicopter in there. And like the helicopter in some cases should be the last resort. Like things go, you talk with the landowner, it's not going well. They're like, nah, I'm not going to let you do it. And you say, well, look, I intend to hunt there. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to helicopter in, right? Like I'm going to fly in. And there might be some conflict there, but there might be ways to diffuse a lot of the conflict with just conversation.
Yeah, the
old kitchen table thing that
absolutely
everybody talks about, the kitchen table.
And I think an unfortunate But an unfortunate thing that people maybe aren't thinking of with stuff like this is, what the likely outcome of this, in this case, it's going to be that he's going to have to outfit. Like, he's going to have to. If he doesn't want people to do stuff like that, his solution, the best one that he can come up with, is going to be, it's going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to have somebody to, I'm going to have a comptroller. I'm going to have to put somebody in charge of making sure that, my fences there's integrity in my fences, and people, and like, whereas before you had somebody who was amicable by being like, I don't want to talk to that guy. I'm just going to go around him. You create adversaries. And so now, like, you've got political adversaries and you got like real adversaries on the ground where you needed to have conversations instead. And again, I don't pretend to know the answer to this. I don't pretend to know like what everybody's going to do in every landowner. Does everybody feel the same? No, they don't all feel the same. But, I do think it's something that folks need to look at, because I don't think that these issues are going to go away for us as sportsmen, because as people are willing to spend more, and if you think about the cost associated with that action, like as people are willing to spend more to hunt, like these types of issues aren't going to go away, and we're gonna run into issues where, because that commodity is so valuable, both getting to hunt, if we're trying to make hunting inexpensive and accessible, this isn't the way to do it. This isn't the way to do it, because as we drive these high dollar workarounds that then pit one service provider against another service provider to see who is going to, we're just turning into, this is economy, right? This is economics, where now we've got, whether you call them an outfitter or not, but you've got a carrier versus an outfitter to see who's going to do these things. Like it's, I don't know that it's good for sportsmen at the end of the day. And so it's interesting.
Let me back this up and go all the way back to the corner crossing example, because I want to give a counterpoint, one more counterpoint.
Do it.
In this example of the Iron Bar Ranch around Elk Mountain, this Fred Eshelman property, he was so adamant about preventing access to public land that he was willing to take this all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Right? I would venture to guess, I don't know the man, but somebody that's willing to go to those lengths and spend those types of resources and pursue criminal prosecution first and then civil after that, and take that civil case all the way to the Supreme Court until the court says, I'm not taking the case. That individual has no interest in allowing somebody to travel through the private land to access that public land unless they pay his outfitter, right? And in this instance, like, I guess I'm kind of the mindset at that point when you've got that much animosity built up, and you have a case that says it is absolutely 100% legal to cross at these corners and hunt, that those individuals, that people should, like, they should not feel obligated to go knock on a door in that instance or try and have a conversation around the kitchen table. He's shown his true colors in that instance. I'm going to take you to court. I'm going to push this as far as it's going to go. In that instance, I'm like, follow the law, but go access your public lands. All right. And I also have feelings of, like, if you want to hire somebody to drop you in by a helicopter in one of those parcels that's deeper in there to be able to hunt, to then corner cross 2 or 3 parcels deeper, like, maybe you should be able to do that. Like, it's like, I'm saying there's not a one size fits all.
No, there's not.
Here.
This brings
that's my counterpoint. It's like, there's just not a one size fits all approach.
This does bring up another really interesting problem that I don't think people are anticipating, but it's real. So with certainty, I visited with somebody who is, I did my homework on this one because I think it's so interesting. one of the areas that this occurred in is fairly close to the Powder River, right? And it's fairly close to the interstate. And the landowners who managed access there, they did less out of, in this parcel, it wasn't as much like they weren't trying to have a giant trophy ranch. They were trying to limit the amount of traffic, right? Because they're like, they're years of oil field stuff anyway. So they just saw it as like, almost an inconvenience. And then they bring in an outfitter, right, to manage the inconvenience. You know what they're going to do now? They're just going to open the gates. Now, here's what's interesting. Like, for everybody that thinks that that's a great idea, you know why they're going to open the gates? They said, literally, you know what? We've tried to protect this place and, have a certain quality animal on there. Let them kill them all. Like, we're tired of dealing with it. We're tired of dealing with trespassers. We're tired of dealing with people breaking the fences and doing all this stuff. So we'll just let them shoot them out. Like, some of these areas are really pristine because of the low access. And like literally you have ranchers, some of these ranchers who are like this family who's just said like, you know what our solution's going to be? We're just going to go to Walmart and tell everybody they can come hunt. And so isn't that interesting? Because like, I think a bunch of us are like suddenly everyone's like, woo, there's guys that are holding up their hands being like, this is awesome. We can go hunt this spot that nobody's ever been, that they've had to hike into. We're just going to be able to drive in there on the 2-track. And they literally said, you know what? We're just going to let it be a pumpkin patch for 2 weeks. And then once it's terrible and people figure out that it's terrible, it's not going to be this area that people are trying to get into as much anymore. And that's what they think is going to happen. Is that really what's going to happen? I don't know. But
it's a pumpkin patch, it's always going to be a pumpkin patch.
That's really, really, it's really one of those things that like, I think that, and I think this goes back to what, like, as much as we talked about, let's go back to the helicopter and not talk about whether you can access it with a helicopter as a hunter. I think we need to start asking the question. I get it. Like we want to be able to access these places. There should be. Do we want people accessing them with a helicopter? And I think that the answer to that question is no. I do. Because here's the problem. If it doesn't take work to get into a spot where the animals are unpressured and it is pristine, if it only takes money, what have we done? What have we done? Because I don't care. I don't care whose name is on it. I don't care whether it says BLM. I don't care whether it says Jim's Farm and Ranch. I don't care what it says. But the reason that the hunting is pristine in these areas, it is not, sometimes it's because, yes, the land around them protects them and it creates a barrier, right? It creates an artificial barrier that where just, we all know, we all hunt. It just it makes the animals feel safe. Why?
Because the harder to access, the more secure the animal feels.
Yes.
The less pressure, the more secure they feel.
So the question is, while we believe that these areas that are public that you should be able to put in the sweat and be able to get in there, I don't think you can paint them all with a broad brush, because the problem is, again, if we just say, look, you know what's a great tool to get into wherever we want? Let's just say, let's have 20 helicopter operators. Through economy, right? We can make this much cheaper if we make it much easier.
You're saying something that's, we've made that policy decision in some places. Every place that there's a wilderness area, you cannot land a helicopter, right?
And you can't use e-bikes in a whole bunch of places. Now the problem is,
right. We've made those decisions,
yes,
and we've made them for very specific reasons, because we want to maintain the wild integrity.
And we could deal with this the same way, just like we have the 24-hour rule. There may be, the question mark becomes, again, for us, and I think it's a legitimate question. If you've got an area that it's like, it's amazing once you get in there, like, how do we control it? And this is what the permitting is for. How do you make sure? Yeah, and it's interesting because like, I'm going to hold up Matt Rinella on one side of this argument and hold up Matt Rinella on the exact opposite side of this argument, arguing with like the hunt quietly stuff and like we don't need any more. Because, these are public lands. We want public lands and public hands, public access. But on the other hand, if they're hard to get into, don't we want them to stay hard to get into for a reason, or do we want an escalator getting in there? Because this is an escalator. Do we want the escalator? I would argue we don't.
I mean, you can take that example you've provided and you can lift it up and you can superimpose it over any number of issues. Things like, should we rescind the roadless rule so that we can build more roads and get into places that, have more opportunities for easy access? Not all access is created equal, right? There are some places where we want to have easy access, where we want to have people be able to road hunt, right? The front country hunter stuff we talk about. There are some places we very intentionally want it to be hard to access. Like you've talked about this thing, and I'm hearing you talk about it. I'm like, man, you could take that, you could put it there, lift that example and put it on roadless rule stuff. You could take that and put it in Alaska on, should we open up the north slope of Anwar for oil and gas development, which would allow road construction in there and some access points. Should we build the Ambler Road, a haul road out to to a mining site? Should we should we be building more and more hiking and biking trails in national forests and on BLM land to get more people into harder to reach places?
Should we have more Jeep trails?
Should we have more Jeep trails? And then you get to the point you're talking about is, should we have places where helicopters are allowed and places where helicopters are not allowed? Or should helicopters just point blank be not allowed? You've identified, this whole conversation is kind of about some of the complexities of multiple use management of public lands. There's a difference. Like, I'm very, very much in the pro access. Like, I feel like I should be able to have the ability to access all of our public land. Like, that's in my dream scenario, in this utopic scenario. I feel like I should have the ability to access all of our public land. But how I access that public land is something
that is the question.
That is the question. Like, I think there are a lot of examples where you should have to put in sweat equity, and there are very strong reasons why you have to put in sweat equity to get to those places. I think there are some places that I'm fine with having a bunch of ORV trails and people busting around, and I'm fine with that. Like, you've just identified in kind of a developing area of access and some of the complexities around it. And I don't think maybe we've had the same robust conversation around that we've had around some of these other things. Like, e-bikes are still I think an emerging issue. Helicopters and drones, those are emerging issues. We've kind of resolved in some ways a lot of the other issues. But we have these new issues. I just think it's fascinating. Not all access is created equal, but I'm a deep believer in I should have the ability to access my public lands. Yeah.
And I agree with you. And I think that's what makes this fascinating, is the question is, okay, well, what does that scale look like? What is that, where are the shades? Where's the nuance in this? And then what do we really want as a management goal at the end of the day? What are we trying to accomplish? And, again, a utopian free-for-all, is that what you call it? Sounds like a great idea.
A libertarian
paradise.
Remember, that's the word.
Same thing. Utopian free-for-all, libertarian paradise. Seems like a great idea until everybody's there. And then when everybody's there together, you go like, wait a minute.
It's the tragedy of the commons.
That's exactly right. And that's what, these are just interesting issues. And I do think I have great empathy for people now who are saying these things like, well, my spot's more crowded than it used to be and all that. Well, all these problems are real. We're not, nobody's lying when they say that their trailhead maybe is more crowded than it used to be, or their elk spot or whatever. No, they're telling the truth. And so these are management challenges that we have to say, like, okay, do we, how do we parse that out in a democratic way, the same way that we do the tags, for example? And how do we make sure that there's opportunity for all without ruining the resource? And it's just these are interesting challenges that we face, and we're not going to solve them on this podcast, but we're going to talk about them, and we're going to ask you to download the podcast, to share this one, because this one ought to make everybody mad. There's something to make everybody mad in this podcast, and you should give it 5 stars, because nobody gave you as good a discussion about this issue as Your Mountain did, and nobody's gonna.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Give us 5 stars. Leave us a comment.
But make sure it's nice.
Good one.
Because we're
nice
sensitive.
Super. I've got real thin skin.
Yeah, me too.
It's like super. I bleed easy. Super thin skin. So yeah, keep it. We need more kindness in the world anyway.
Yeah, especially on our comment feed.
Yeah. That's exactly right. It'd really appreciate that. And we're not going to solve it all because I'm going to go to bed. But
I'm out of root beer.
So you're going to go to bed too. So what I am going to do is say, because I always say this, send us a note. Find us at yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. If you've written us in like the last month, I am super sorry.
We haven't looked. We haven't been home.
I will get to responding to some emails. I'm really sorry. Between work and hunting season and so forth, I have been derelict on my duties there. But it doesn't mean we don't want you to write. So send us a note at yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. I promise I will respond. Nephi won't, but I promise I'll respond at some point. Or if you prefer, if it's easier for you to send us a note on our social media channels, you can do that. The handle is @itsyourmountain on Instagram and Facebook. We may not post a lot, but we check those comments. So, but again, if you've sent something through those in the last month or two,
sorry again.
Yeah. Sorry again. But we'll do it. So reach out to us. It's like we've said it a bunch of times, like the interaction we get with y'all that listen, that's kind of our fuel to keep doing this stuff. Love hearing from you. Love having the back and forth and the dialogue. Love knowing that you appreciate the content and you want us to do more of it. So, keep those comments coming, keep hitting that 5-star review. Keep telling your friends, like we need some guerrilla marketing. Tell your friends, get on Reddit, whatever, all the things you do to push this stuff out. Help us get the word out about these things.
We're also looking for a helicopter sponsor.
That's true. If you have a helicopter's license and are willing to take us into places for free, so
you
we don't have
can't
to
charge us.
Can't charge us. Just a sponsorship to haul us into places for free. We're open to that, as any good person would be.
We might not think it's a great idea, but
maybe we'll do it. We're hypocrites. We're just we're happy to be hypocritical. Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, interesting stuff. Thanks all for being along for the ride. And anything else from you, Nephi?
No, thanks for entertaining the conversation. And in seriousness, because that last one, we're actually not looking for a sponsor. But we really, really appreciate all of you. We appreciate the comments. And, the coolest part about all this, the reason people are listening, the reason we're talking about this is because we care about that resource. Everybody cares about that resource. They enjoy it. They love it. They love going to check it out. They love hunting and they love these places. And I think that that's what makes this compelling to talk about, is that we all share a common interest in it.
I got nothing to add on to that. You're right. Well, I do have something to add on to it. You're right. And you and I both share it too. I mean, I just came back from a week and a half hunting our public lands and had just an amazing experience. And there were a couple of days where it was a real pumpkin patch out there, but there were still animals, and it was awesome, and want to be able to keep doing it. So thanks again. Share. Send this everywhere. Get it to your friends, get it to your family, give them our catalog. There's like 210 episodes to choose from, something like that.
They're all better.
Share a
They're all
catalog.
better than this one.
Share the catalog, and remember that life is about experiences. So go have one.